Pleiadians reveal the true second coming of Christ. The white light is entering Earth, breaking the hidden veil in human hearts, exposing every false life, and calling the soul back to God at last now. The second coming of Christ will not first terrify humanity because of what appears in the sky. It will terrify humanity because of what can no longer remain hidden in the soul. We speak to you now as the Pleiadians, and we do not come to entertain your imagination with spectacle while leaving your inner life untouched. We come because a living tide of divine illumination is already entering the field of your world, and many of you are feeling it without having language for what is happening. Some of you have felt it in silence. Some of you have felt it in the middle of prayer. Some of you have felt it while standing in a church, repeating holy words with your mouth while realizing your heart was trembling before something much more real than ritual. Some of you have felt it at Mass, not as comfort, but as interruption. Not as religion, but as invasion. Not as tradition, but as truth. And that is why this hour feels so strange. Because the return of Christ is not only about a presence descending from above. It is also about a divine substance pressing through the hardened interior of humanity, exposing every part of life that was built without love, without honesty, without surrender, and without God. Many of you were taught to wait for a grand event that would happen somewhere outside you. But what if the beginning of that return is not first external? What if it begins when the false life inside a human being loses the ability to continue? What if it begins when the soul can no longer bear the split between what it says in sacred places and what it serves in secret? This is why people are crying without explanation. This is why some enter places of worship and feel their chest tighten. This is why old sins no longer satisfy and old masks no longer fit. This is why some of you feel that your life is being quietly judged, not by cruelty, but by an unbearable purity that will no longer let you lie to yourself. We tell you clearly, a powerful wave of illuminating force is moving across the planet. It is not sentimental. It is not decorative. It is not here merely to inspire the spiritual and leave the rest untouched. It is here to dissolve the dense formations that kept humanity inwardly numb. It is here to weaken the lower fields that fed confusion, manipulation, psychic heaviness, imitation, empty devotion, and separation from the living truth within. It is here to thin the veil so completely that what was once hidden in thought, motive, and allegiance will begin to surface in every class of human life. And that is why this moment is so sacred and so dangerous. Because the same light that heals the surrendered will expose the defended. The same white brilliance that awakens divine memory in one soul will make concealment unbearable in another. The same presence that feels like mercy to the honest will feel like pressure to those who built their identity on distortion. We do not say this to frighten you. We say this because too many of you were told that divine return would flatter your existing beliefs. No. Divine return reveals what your beliefs were hiding. It tests what your life truly loved. It separates appearance from essence. It shows whether you wanted God, or whether you wanted the comfort of speaking about God while remaining untouched by Him. Many of you are beginning to understand this in deeply human ways. A woman stands with folded hands during Mass, and suddenly the word she has known since childhood stops sounding ceremonial and starts sounding like an accusation against the life she has learned to fake. A man kneels in a pew after years of appearing morally upright, and he realizes he has built an image of goodness that never required him to become tender, honest, or inwardly clean. A son who blamed everyone for his emptiness suddenly feels a grief he cannot explain because something in him knows he has outrun his own conscience for too long. A mother who prayed for peace begins to understand that peace was never going to enter a life she kept organizing around fear, resentment, and spiritual delay. This is how the return begins for many of you. Not as applause, as confrontation, not as fantasy, as exposure, not as a story you watch from a distance, as a decision entering the hidden rooms of your own being. And we tell you with solemn love, this is not the end of humanity. It is the end of humanity's ability to remain divided while pretending to seek the holy. It is the beginning of a planetary reckoning in which the divine within every soul is being called forward, and everything that cannot stand in that light will either surrender, separate, or dissolve. Stay with us, because we are not giving you a vague message. We are giving you a transmission about thresholds, mercy, spiritual law, the falling of the veil, the white light that will leave nothing hidden, the souls who will help stabilize humanity, and the long age of grace that can follow if enough of you choose truth over disguise. And before this transmission closes, you will understand why the true second coming of Christ is not only something humanity waits for. It is something humanity is being forced to answer. We are not announcing a symbol, we are announcing a threshold. For centuries, humanity reduced divine return to imagery it could admire without having to be remade by it. That was one of the most convenient distortions of all. It allowed human beings to talk about Christ while remaining loyal to pride. It allowed institutions to preserve sacred language while the interior life of countless people remained fractured, defensive, performative, and spiritually asleep. It allowed the human heart to place holiness on an altar while keeping its actual choices chained to fear, vanity, appetite, control, and self-protection. That season is ending. We are not here to announce a metaphor only. We are not here to speak in beautiful abstractions that leave you unchanged. We are announcing a threshold. A living threshold. A planetary threshold. A threshold in which divine illumination is becoming too strong for the old arrangement of the human psyche to continue. The false agreement between sacred appearance and inward fragmentation is being broken. This is why many of you feel tension in places where you expected peace. It is not because holiness has moved farther from you. It is because holiness has moved closer. And when holiness comes closer, it does not merely soothe. It reveals. It reveals where your love has become mechanical. It reveals where your morality has become theater. It reveals where your faith became vocabulary instead of surrender. It reveals where your prayers were real and where they were only repetition. It reveals what part of you genuinely longed for God, and what part of you only wanted spiritual identity. We say this with care because many of you are frightened by what you are feeling. You are not imagining it. You are not weak. You are not losing your mind because sacred places suddenly feel more intense than before. You are sensing the difference between inherited religion and living contact. And once that difference becomes felt in the body, heard in the conscience, and recognized in the soul, nothing remains superficial for long. A person who has said holy words for 30 years may suddenly hear those same words as if they were spoken for the first time. A person who took communion as routine may suddenly feel the unbearable sorrow of having lived so far beneath what their own soul knew was possible. A person who thought they had no relationship with God may be shattered open by a single moment of purity that reveals how deeply they were always being called. This is why we say the second coming of Christ is not only external expectation. It is also internal summons. It is divine reality becoming too near for the divided self to maintain control. And as that nearness increases, humanity enters the next phase, the dissolving of dense thought itself. The wave of illumination is entering the human mind. There is a force moving across Earth now that does not ask permission from your old mental structures before it touches them. It enters the thought world of humanity. It enters memory. It enters hidden motives. It enters the lower architecture of perception. It enters the astral layers that helped keep falsehood emotionally sustainable. This is why dense thought forms are beginning to break down. We are speaking of more than negative thinking in a simple sense. We are speaking of whole interior systems by which human beings maintained their alienation from divine truth. Thought patterns built on hatred, superiority, self-justification, perversion of conscience, contempt for innocence, and addiction to falsehood are losing stability under the incoming brilliance. For some, this will feel like liberation. For others, it will feel like suffocation. A woman who spent years carrying self-hatred may suddenly realize those thoughts are not her identity and can no longer dominate her with the same force. A man who nourished secret cruelty may feel increasing agitation because the energy that once fed his distortion is thinning. A public spiritual figure who learned to speak of love while serving control may find their inner life becoming hostile, unstable, and impossible to silence. A quiet soul who thought they were insignificant may discover that their simple sincerity has far more power under this light than the impressive performance of those who built themselves on image. Can you see what is happening? The wave does not create your essence. It reveals your allegiance. It does not decide for you whom you serve. It intensifies what you have already chosen until that choice becomes impossible to hide. This is why all of Earth will feel it. Not only saints. Not only mystics. Not only religious people. The entire population of the world will be touched because the field itself is being filled. People with no spiritual language will still sense that something inside them is under pressure. People who never prayed may suddenly feel called to honesty. People who mocked faith may find themselves unable to escape moments of piercing clarity. People who hid inside doctrine may discover that doctrine cannot shield the soul from contact with living truth. That is why we tell you not to mistake discomfort for failure. Some of your discomfort is the sensation of false structure cracking. Some of your sorrow is the grief of the soul realizing how long it lived below its own divine inheritance. Some of your fear is the terror of a mask that knows it is dying. And yet, even in this, mercy is everywhere. Because no being is being exposed merely to be humiliated. Beings are being exposed so they may choose. And that choice becomes sharper as the next great reality is understood. Not all who lived in distortion are beyond rescue. Even those aligned with darkness are being offered a final mercy. Humanity often imagines light and darkness in crude, theatrical ways. We ask you to become more mature than that. There are intelligences, lineages, factions, human and non-human actors, and long-standing currents that align themselves with domination, inversion, manipulation, spiritual violation, and sustained resistance to divine order. Some names have been given to these across traditions. Some of those names have been distorted by fear, myth, or partial knowledge. But the essential truth remains. There are beings who knowingly served darkness. Yet listen carefully. The greatness of this hour is not only that light is increasing. It is that mercy is increasing with it. If those aligned with darkness choose to surrender now, truly surrender, spiritually surrender, they are not refused the possibility of release. That is one of the deepest revelations of divine order. The holy does not resemble human revenge. It does not become pure by becoming merciless. It remains pure by remaining truthful, even while offering the way back. This is why we say that this planetary passage is not merely a sorting of the worthy from the unworthy. It is a final intensification of choice. A being who served distortion may still turn. A human who built a life on manipulation may still break open in remorse. A consciousness that fed from separation may still renounce it. A soul that spent lifetimes resisting love may still, in this hour of pressure, drop to its knees inwardly and say yes. And if that yes is real, pathways of restoration exist. There are processes, fields, and centers of recovery within the wider galactic order where beings may be guided away from the intoxication of darkness and helped into reorientation with divine purpose. This is not fantasy. This is law joined with compassion. There are realms for rehabilitation because divine intelligence does not waste consciousness when surrender is still possible. But mercy does not mean permission to remain the same. This is where many fail to understand. A being may be forgiven and still not be permitted to continue in the same field while refusing transformation. A human may be offered love and still be separated from environments where their distortion can no longer be allowed to feed. A non-human intelligence may be given a path of recovery and still be removed from the developing conditions of Earth if it refuses to yield. Why? Because resonance is real. You cannot fill a world with higher illumination and then insist that everything hostile to illumination remains equally rooted within it. That is not compassion. That is sabotage. This is why the hour is so serious. Because for those who refuse the light, reality as they knew it will begin to dissolve. The old environments that sustained them will not hold indefinitely. The structures that protected their denial will weaken. The field will no longer cooperate with the continuation of what it was chosen to heal. And for those who accept the light, another responsibility rises. The earth will need stabilizers, bearers, anchors of living Christic presence. That brings us to one of the most misunderstood thresholds in spiritual history. The 144,000 are not a trophy, they are a burden of love. So many on earth have turned sacred numbers into ego fuel. They have wanted to be special more than they wanted to be clean. They have wanted to be chosen more than they wanted to be transformed. They have wanted title without sacrifice, symbolism without surrender, destiny without purification. That distortion must end. The 144,000 are not a reward category. They are not an elite club of admired souls hovering above humanity. They are those who become sufficiently transparent to living Christ consciousness that their very presence begins to help liberate others. They are not important because they are rare. They are important because they become usable. Imagine a human being who no longer needs to manipulate to feel secure. A human being who no longer feeds on superiority. A human being who no longer uses spirituality to avoid truth. A human being who can stand in love without becoming weak, and stand in truth without becoming cruel. A human being whose interior life has become so aligned with divine order that their presence changes the atmosphere around them. That is what we mean. One such being can affect thousands. Not through spectacle. Not through propaganda. Not through domination. Through resonance. Through coherence. Through embodied purity. A mother who becomes inwardly clear may raise children in a field of honesty that breaks ancestral cycles of emotional violence. A teacher who becomes aligned may restore dignity to those who were trained to distrust their own conscience. A priest, a worker, a nurse, a widow, a young man, an old woman, any soul whatsoever, once inwardly consecrated in truth, can transmit far more than information. They can transmit spiritual permission. They can transmit courage. They can transmit remembrance. They can transmit the felt evidence that divine life is real and can be lived. This is why the number matters. It marks a threshold of catalytic stabilization. Once enough truly aligned humans stand upon Earth, the rate of uplift multiplies. Souls awaken more easily. Falsehood has less cover. Conscience strengthens across communities. The holy becomes contagious in the highest sense. And yet, those called into such bearing should tremble, not boast. Because to become such a bearer, everything counterfeit in you must be brought to the fire. Your motives, your wounds, your hidden appetites, your need to be seen, your secret bargains with resentment, your dependence on spiritual identity, your attachment to being admired for goodness instead of actually becoming good. That is why so many who are genuinely being prepared for this work feel humbled, stripped, exposed, and inwardly undone. They are not being punished. They are being emptied of what would contaminate the transmission. For these bearers to stand, another change is also required. The veil above Earth must continue to dissolve. The net around Earth is breaking, and the sun is carrying more than light. For ages, humanity has lived beneath an unseen interference field. Many sensed it but could not name it. It intensified confusion. It thickened the lower astral range. It helped distort perception. It made noble impulses harder to sustain and destructive impulses easier to feed. It kept the human being close to appetite, reaction, repetition, and fragmentation. It supported the great forgetting. We tell you now, this dark veil is weakening. Do not expect that weakening to look simple. When a suffocating covering begins to tear, what lies beneath does not instantly become serene. At first, much rises. Much is exposed. Many hidden things begin to move. What was concealed by pressure enters visibility. Systems built on lies begin to shake. Personalities built on internal suppression begin to unravel. Entire collective structures may appear more unstable before clarity becomes established. Do not let that confuse you. Exposure is not failure. Exposure is the evidence that concealment is losing power. As this veil weakens, solar codes, galactic intelligence, and divine ordering frequencies reach Earth more directly. We are not asking you to reduce this to mystical language alone. Your sun is not merely a physical furnace. Within the sacred design of life, it also functions as a carrier, a transmitter, a luminous distributor of living information. As the obstruction lessens, the capacity of this influx to enter mind, body, conscience, and collective possibility increases. This is why some of you have felt strange surges of clarity. This is why dreams intensify. This is why environments built on dishonesty feel unbearable more quickly. This is why people who once tolerated internal compromise now feel physically, emotionally, and spiritually strained by it. This is why some are becoming more compassionate while others are becoming more agitated. The light entering Earth does not make everyone look holy. It makes everyone more visible to themselves. And as the lower astral planes lose density, the patterns once sustained there also begin to collapse. This means addictions of thought, emotional parasitism, psychic fog, and many forms of hidden feeding will no longer function with the same support. Some humans will celebrate this without understanding the responsibility it brings. Hear us carefully. As the lower support structures fade, your own choices become more direct. You will not be able to blame every distortion on the atmosphere once the atmosphere itself is being purified. The soul will be more accountable. And eventually, this purification leads to a moment more powerful than most human beings are prepared to imagine. The white light. Not as metaphor, as encounter. When the white light arrives, you will meet the truth of your own life. There will come a passage in which vast numbers of souls encounter a degree of white divine luminosity that cannot be negotiated with. Nothing borrowed survives there. Nothing theatrical survives there. Nothing merely performed survives there. The white light does not hate you, but it does remove the distance between you and what you really are. This is why some of you tremble as you hear these words. Something within you recognizes this already. The soul knows what it is to be seen completely. It knows the terror of total revelation. It knows the relief of no longer hiding. It knows that the deepest judgment is not insult. It is clarity. In that light, a person will not only see what they did wrong. They will see what they kept refusing to become. They will see every compromise against conscience, every love withheld out of pride, every cruelty justified as strength, every truth postponed for convenience, every lie repeated until it felt normal, every wound turned into identity, every sacred prompting ignored because comfort mattered more. But that is not all they will see. They will also see every hidden act of love, every small fidelity, every prayer spoken in weakness, every silent turning toward the good, every time their soul tried to rise through sorrow, every tenderness they thought was insignificant, every moment they nearly chose courage, every buried innocence that never fully died. This is why the white light is so overwhelming. It exposes corruption, yes, but it also reveals essence. It shows the lost magnificence beneath the distortion. It reveals not only what you became in fear, but who you remained in God beneath all the layers. For the surrendered, this is liberation. For the defended, this is unbearable. A man who spent his life controlling others may in one instant see that all his power was fear trying not to kneel. A woman who built herself around pleasing and silence may see how deeply she abandoned the voice God placed within her. A religious leader who spoke beautifully while remaining inwardly unclean may see the entire architecture of performance collapse before reality. A forgotten old woman who loved quietly and forgave without applause may shine in ways that astonish worlds. This is why we tell you, prepare not by trying to appear spiritual, but by becoming honest now. The white light does not arrive to flatter your image of yourself. It arrives to reconcile you with truth. After this encounter, there will be no unchanged humanity. Souls will continue according to resonance. Some will move into the transformed field of earth in a higher state of embodied participation. Some who are already deeply prepared will move beyond that more quickly. Some will enter healing, instruction, and reorientation. Some who refuse entirely will be taken out of the emerging field. And what follows for those who remain is not idleness. It is training. It is holy education. It is the rebuilding of civilization from truth outward. The schools of spiritual formation are ready. Many on earth imagine ascension as escape. That is childish. Real evolution requires understanding. When humanity passes beyond the heaviest veiling, countless souls will need to learn what they could not clearly learn under distortion. They will need to understand their soul history, their former creations, their karmic patterns, their true origin, their deeper purpose, the consequences of thought and intention, and the way divine law operates in a more transparent field. This is why the schools are ready. These are not schools of humiliation. They are schools of remembrance, correction, recovery, initiation, and conscious development. There, souls will learn without the old brutality of earth. They will see the patterns that governed their lives. They will understand how their choices shaped reality. They will confront the wounds they spread. They will receive the teaching necessary to inhabit a higher dimension of life without recreating the old distortions in a brighter setting. There they will learn that creation is never morally empty, that thought has form, that desire has consequence, that freedom is sacred, but never separate from responsibility. That love is not sentimental weakness, but alignment with divine order. That truth is not a weapon to dominate others, but a law that must first cleanse the self. That service is not slavery, but willing participation in the flourishing of life. This stage matters more than most of humanity understands. Because if souls entered a purified world with the same unexamined distortions, they would reproduce tragedy under finer conditions. So the coming age requires schools of consciousness. It requires structured grace. It requires a civilization built around wisdom rather than competition, initiation rather than manipulation, reverence rather than extraction. Some of you, hearing us, were prepared long before this life for such a phase. Some of you have already done deep spiritual work across prior embodiments and will move more quickly through these thresholds. Some of you will help teach. Some of you will help stabilize communities. Some of you will serve as bridges for those newly awakened. Others will need more gradual integration. None of this is shameful. Readiness is not superiority. Readiness is responsibility. And Earth itself is being prepared for a role far greater than mere survival. Earth can become a world of peace, initiation, and living wisdom. There is a span ahead in which Earth need not be governed by the old engines of fear. Not because struggle never existed, but because struggle no longer defines the organizing principle of civilization. There can be a period of thousands of years marked by grace, peace, spiritual growth, cooperative learning, and conscious participation in divine purpose. This is not naive fantasy. It is one of the trajectories now available if enough of humanity yields to the light entering the planet. In that age, the centers of greatest value will not be those that manufacture distraction, domination, or greed. They will be centers of learning, centers of wisdom, centers of spiritual formation, centers where consciousness is cultivated and responsibility is honored. Human life will no longer revolve around hiding from itself. It will revolve around becoming worthy of the truth it has been given. Children will be guided toward the pattern of their souls rather than molded into instruments of fear. Communities will learn cooperation without forced sameness. The sacred will no longer be reduced to occasional ceremony while daily life serves another master. Beauty will return as moral nourishment. Speech will recover weight. Authority will be measured by alignment, not force. And Earth, having passed through long ages of density and forgetting, will be able to serve the wider galactic order in a new way. A world that endured deep fragmentation and still chose awakening carries a wisdom that cannot be imitated. It becomes capable of helping other worlds still struggling within lower dimensional development. It becomes a place of teaching, of initiation, of refuge, of example. Do you understand the dignity of that possibility? You who once needed help may become helpers. You who once lived beneath the veil may become guardians of remembrance. You who once suffered confusion may become teachers of discernment. You who once waited for the light may become bearers of it. This is one reason we have remained in relationship with Earth. We did not look upon your world only as a failed experiment. We looked upon it as a wounded but extraordinary school. And now that school stands near its great turning point. But none of this becomes real through admiration alone. It becomes real through choice. That is why we close where all transmission must finally close. Inside the human heart. The second coming will be answered in the way you live. We leave you with this, beloved humanity. The second coming of Christ is not merely an event to be discussed, predicted, ritualized, or imagined. It is a living judgment of alignment. It is the return of divine truth with such force that the split between your outer life and your inner allegiance can no longer remain hidden. It is the moment when what you truly love becomes visible. It is the moment when your soul is called to stand where your words once stood in your place. This is why the hour is so intense. This is why your excuses feel weaker. This is why false comfort is losing its power. This is why some of you feel as though something holy is pressing against your life from the inside. Because it is. And we say to you with solemn compassion, do not waste this hour trying to protect the life that light came to transform. If you have lived divided, become honest. If you have hidden behind religion, become real. If you have used spirituality to avoid surrender, stop. If you have served darkness knowingly, surrender while mercy still holds the door open. If you have loved truth in secret but feared to live it openly, step forward now. If you have waited for God to move while refusing the places in you that needed to bow, let that waiting end. The veil is thinning. The lower fields are breaking. The hidden net is losing power. The white light approaches. The bearers are being prepared. The schools are ready. The future is not yet forced, but it is being shaped by what humanity chooses in this hour of exposure. We are the Pleiadians. We do not come to entertain your longing. We come to call it into decision. So let Mass no longer be only repetition. Let prayer no longer be only language. Let worship no longer be only posture. Let Christ no longer be only a figure you await from afar, while refusing the divine life trying to rise within you now. The true return will not first be known by the loudest voices, the most dramatic claims, or the most elaborate prophecies. It will be known by the human being who can no longer betray the light once it has entered. If this transmission reached the part of you that has been waiting not for comfort, but for truth, write your witness below, share it with the soul standing on the edge of surrender, and remain in reverence. Because the second coming of Christ will not merely be seen. It will be answered. And the answer will be written in the life that remains when every false thing in you has finally fallen silent.